Blood Money, article by Anna von Reitz, Part 17. Additional issues for the International Court of Justice, the bond system. Before publishing this, I want people to fully grasp the fact that bonds are associated with bondage, which always requires performance. So bonds impose a form of servitude, always. Bonds are not a good thing. So when people get all excited and talk about the value of bonds, what they are actually talking about is the value of someone's performance, their labor, their talents, their intellectual property, being exchanged for money for a period of years, and their obligation to perform upon the terms of those bonds. When you are sold into bondage, someone gets a payoff, and that someone is typically not you. You get the performance part of the deal only. Many of you have read about the practice of indentured servitude, a process by which people bound themselves to serve in a particular capacity for a number of years, typically 7 years, to pay off a debt. Many people came to this country as indentured servants, bonded servants, and worked off their debt and became free men. Even slaves could, given the right opportunities and conditions, find means to earn extra money and buy themselves out of slavery. It is impossible to bond an American against their will, but we remain free to bond ourselves, which we have been presumed to do, as a result of the birth certification and underlying registration process. To be exact, the perpetrators claim that our mothers freely and voluntarily gave us up as wards of the state-of-state British Crown franchise operating our state government for us, on an emergency basis, of course. Millions of Americans know that this is total bunk and that our mothers were never given full disclosure and that these innocent women were railroaded into signing these papers under color of law and in breach of trust. But that little fact is lurking like a great white shark just under the surface of their system. According to them, our mothers signed us up, and we continued to voluntarily participate when we reached the age of majority. The fact that the purported contract was signed when we were just babies and therefore totally unconscionable to us, and never disclosed to our mothers either, is another point that the perpetrators neglect to admit. Thus, we have been self-enslaved under foreign and undisclosed contracting processes promoted by our public employees, who have sold us into both slavery as municipal citizens of the United States and as indentured servants presumed to be British territorial U.S. citizens. So, now that you know that bonds are not good things and that you only get the bad end of the stick, let's take a look at an actual birth certificate account, mine. The state of Wisconsin birth certificate shows that a female, that is, a daughter of Adam, was physically born on June 6, 1956, and the initial certificate was issued by Dr. Kenneth F. Manns, MD, actually the attending physician, on June 27, 1956. It was received by the Office of the Registrar from Dr. Manns on June 28, 1956, and I was unlawfully converted into a British territorial U.S. citizen and indentured person on June 28, 1956. All this registration work was done via a municipal corporation doing business as the Wisconsin State Board of Health. Remember that Wisconsin State is the state trust the rats established after the Civil War for us to manage our property for us in our absence, even though we hadn't gone anywhere. So the doctor was the undeclared foreign agent claiming me as property belonging to the Queen and the British Crown Corporation franchise, running both the Wisconsin State Trust and the state of Wisconsin for me. And not a word was said to my mother, or for that matter to me, when I reached the age of majority. The initial bond has been rolled over several times in the course of my life, so the original bond shows as a file number 14856XXX. The first set of numbers, 148, identifies the British Crown Corporation franchise, and the 56 identifies the year. And the XXX, which is also numeric, but I am not publishing, identifies the exact record that entered me into their system. A more recent version of the document shows an 8-digit bond number in red ink at the bottom of the certificate. This is an IMF bond. The United Nations has held these bonds since Jimmy Carter so generously donated them in 1980 as one of his last, thank God, acts as president. Now this is purportedly a private contract, something that my mother and later I entered into knowingly, willingly, and voluntarily, a supposition that everyone reading this knows is pure bunk. We were simply never told anything about these cozy, unilateral, undisclosed, and for my part unconscionable contracts being entered into for me by uniformed federal officers. Doctors are conscripted under Federal Code Title 37, so while my mother was paying for a private physician, Dr. Manns was acting as an MD and signed the certificate as such. He took me into custody and sold me into indentured servitude benefiting the USA Inc., and he very broadly presumed that I was an unwanted bastard child, abandoned on the battlefield of an illegal mercenary war being carried out in secret by my own public employees, 91 years after the American Civil War actually ceased. You can't make this stuff up. Now, what happens to little Anna Maria? The little girl goes on and lives and grows up. The British territorial person birthed by this illicit registration process is moved to the District of Columbia, where she is registered again by the Department of Commerce as a special purpose vehicle, doing business as a corporation franchise of the Municipal United States government, Anna Maria Reisinger. While the British person carrying my proper name is just an indentured servant, the municipal person is a slave, both of whom have to buy their way out of their servitude every step of the way, because at the end of that day they owe everything to the state trust, where I am actually lodged and which they manage for me. Okay, are you able to follow along here? They seize upon me as a baby in my cradle, include me as property belonging to the Wisconsin State Trust, which they then commandeer and manage for me in my absence. After this initial act of misrepresentation and kidnapping and unlawful conversion of my nationality and political status, they remove the resulting British person they have named after me to the District of Columbia. Once in the District of Columbia, they incorporate an additional municipal corporation named Anna Maria Reisinger as a Sesta QV estate trust, and they begin spinning off derivatives, other commercial corporation franchises that are all special purpose vehicles presumed to be engaged in various public commercial capacities. So, we have, for example, their current scapegoat, Anna M. Reisinger, a bankrupt Puerto Rican electrical company franchise. These municipal franchise corporations are all promptly bundled up and transported offshore to Puerto Rico, or more recently, the Mariana Islands, where they are graciously administered as church properties under the Spanish law of the Inquisition. Now you know how and why the IRS is so effective as a debt collector of your voluntary federal income taxes, whether or not you are a federal employee or dependent. Let's examine the actual books using my BC account as a totally typical example of what is in fact owed to an average American versus what is owed by that same American in the aggregate. This is a recent April 2021 look at my account. You will see that it is organized as BC Front QSIBs and BC Back EE Series paper bond QSIB numbers. Anna Maria Reisinger account, BC Front QSIBs, are as follows. Altogether, they are holding $12,321,230,000 in the Wisconsin State Trust for me, but all this prepaid credit is conveniently blocked. It was prepaid by my parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents, and by me too, but I can't access it. Remember, my person has been unlawfully converted into a British territorial person, and until I return from over the seas, this account belongs to an American and is unclaimed property. So the perpetrators of this scheme use it as an investment capital slush fund instead of using it to benefit me or my family or even my country. Now let's look at the debt side of the account. Here we see the back side of the account, and we see that Federal Reserve notes of the EE00080771 series have been issued in my name as public debts. So I, that is the municipal persons they have created in my name, owe $50,360,000 in debt. This is what they are always promoting and attempting to collect from the debtor and using as the excuse to confiscate the property of living Americans and to harass them in municipal courts, and claiming that these persons owe all sorts of taxes and other debts, when in fact all these debts are owed by the organizations promoting this enormous fraud and money laundering scheme on the backs of the American people. BC Back EE Series Paper Bond QSIP EE000807771, 5,036 times 10,000 for denomination, 50,360,000. The actual tally when the books are balanced is that these vermin owe me $12,270,870,000 as of the day we pulled the record. And they are still trying to pretend that I, or at least various municipal persons named after me, owe them money for all this service, and they are proposing to steal my house, entitle themselves to my home, arrest me whenever they please, and, if necessary to free themselves of their insurmountable debts, they propose to sacrifice their property, that is, to kill us all in order to get rid of their priority creditors. Well, we have a better idea. We have come home and proven and declared our birthright political status as Americans, owed every penny of our state trust. We are the actual landlords, and they are the tenants. It's time to balance the books. Please bear in mind that this does not mean that you or I are suddenly going to be in possession of gazillions of dollars with no stipulations or responsibilities. That's not what it means at all. What it means is that we and our state and our ancestors are owed a tremendous amount of prepaid credit that needs to be gradually paid down, so as to maintain the value of our currency throughout the world, improve our lives, set us free from harassment from our own employees, and promote a safe, clean, sane, and truthful world in which all children can grow up happily and achieve their dreams, a world in which all families and all nations are respected. We cherish the many cultures and nations, the colorful diversity of life and all its forms, and we utterly reject any model of corporate feudalism that certain bankers and other scum have advocated. Norwegians won't be inundated with displaced Muslims from Iraq anymore. Neither will there be wars that murder and leave people homeless, promoted by thieves and mental incompetence. What this means on an individual level is that you, plain old Joe Q American, should never see another tax bill of any kind again, or suffer any potholes. You should never have to quibble over a land title belonging to a British version of yourself. You should never see another public utility bill of any kind in your lifetime. You should never be misaddressed by any foreign federal officer or foreign state-of-state court or law enforcement officer. You should never have to worry about a medical bill, the cost of medicine, a college debt, or buying a new car when you need one, ever. And bear in mind, this is just the sort out of the birth certificate bonds. Other bonds were packed on our weary backs as well. You are the richest people on earth, even though you have been treated as slaves in your own country for 158 years. It's time for this abysmal nonsense to end. The Americans have seen through the deceit, and the Roman civil law demands the removal of the fraud and its results, to return our land and our good names and our prepaid credit and everything else that is legitimately ours. We have also seen through the inland piracy practiced against us by the Queen's government and the Lords of the Admiralty. The law of the sea maintains that possession by pirates does not change ownership. And so we have reclaimed all our property, our purloined gold and silver, our good name, our copyrights, our trademarks, our patents, our public buildings, our land patents, our post offices, all of it. As it turns out, we also own most of Western Europe, which has been badly bungled too. Contrary to fears that we will enslave the populace or repossess property, we propose to free everyone concerned and return each man to his own place with his own property intact. The principles of war do not apply. We will consider this a true jubilee, the first in over 800 years, and the creditors will gradually and sensibly release all the debts and hold the living people harmless, so long as everyone keeps their heads together and proceeds in an orderly fashion. There will be no UN death squads on our shores, no Chinese troops on our nickel, no false claims in commerce misapplied to anyone, and no more continued pretense of mercenary war on our shores. Instead, those who have been harmed by this pernicious system will be made whole and enabled to live free and secure and dignified lives. Everyone will be educated and fully informed and enabled to take responsibility for their own lives as self-governing beings. And anyone seeking to enslave, bring false claims in commerce, impersonating anyone, or playing any of these loathsome games on our turf will be recognized as a criminal, arrested and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the public law. This is our will as the actual government of this country, and our employees of every stripe are fully obligated to obey, and the high courts are all obligated to enforce from the top down as we enforce from the bottom up. We believe that this little expose, using my account as an example of what is totally typical and more than adequately demonstrates not only the existence of our exemption accounts, but locates them, and also explains the mechanisms used to establish and misdirect the system so as to misidentify and enslave the actual creditors. Instead of owing anyone for the use of Federal Reserve notes, I am owed for the use of Federal Reserve notes issued against my good name and credit. Any debts owed by any corporate person named after me utterly pale in comparison to what I am owed, so that I and millions of other Americans are without question owed the mutual offset credit exemption exchanges that were stipulated in 1933-34, and our feckless foreign employees need to organize themselves to issue the exemption credits. We suggest an overhaul of the Internal Revenue Service and the IRS to coordinate their activities with the Treasury and expedite the opening of our exemption accounts as each American returns home to the land and soil of our beloved country and reestablishes their identity as an American.